Hello, you're watching Transbrations. I'm nahshondion. Today's episode is very special, and our special guest is Gwendolyn Ann Smith. She's been an advocate for the transgender community for most of her adult life, with the focus on the trans community on the internet, as well as in honoring those we've lost due to anti-transgender violence. In 1999, she founded Transgender Day of Remembrance, TDoR, which is honored in hundreds of locations across the country and worldwide. Gwen's also a graphic designer and an avid writer, penning a column on transgender issues and ideas for the Bay Area Reporter in San Francisco, California. Her column Transmissions has been running bi-weekly since 2000. In July of 2017, Transactive, a biography of Gwendolyn Ann Smith, was published by Wake Forest and released on Amazon.com. Gwendolyn's also currently active in the metaverse and virtual worlds. Gwen, thank you for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a lovely day out here.
What's the weather like out there?
And it's 60s right now and very clear.
Oh, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. It's almost like 36, 37 degrees out here in New York.
Yeah, out here we don't get snow on the ground. We get it on the hills. So.
And you are based in San Francisco?
Yeah, in the Bay Area.
Tell us about Remembering Our Dead, the project that you started in 1998, correct?
That's correct. It was initially a website where I was chronicling cases of anti-transgender murder. I had started it because I had been talking with a number of other trans people online just in the wake of the murder of Rita Hester, who was murdered in November of 1998. The attitude I got back from people was, well, tell us about the story. So I did, and while we were discussing it, I said, this sounds a lot like the Chanel Pickett murder, because I said, she was killed, in November of 1995. 3 years before. She was a young africanamerican trans woman, which is the number one cause or number one intersection of these murders. Mm-hmm. She was in the Boston area. So I started saying, this sounds a lot like this. And we're like, well, who's Chanel Pickett? We've never heard of this. And some of these individuals were actually in the Boston area where both of these cases happened. And so it made me realize that, these are stories that are being forgotten. We don't know our history. We don't know what's going on. And we're seeing, there's a quote about from George Santayana about those who fail to remember their past are doomed to repeat it. Mm-hmm. And I felt like we don't know our past, and we're seeing these murders just perpetuate. So that started the project. That made go, we really need to pay attention to this. We really need to know what's going on. If there's someone out there hunting us, if there's lots of people trying to kill us, whatever, we need to know. We need to know what's happening to our lives and to our friends. So that started the project. That made me go out and start to research these cases, find as many anti-trans murders or other violent actions as I could, and start to build this project.
And how did you find out about Rita Hester? Did you read about it, or someone told you about it? I
saw a report in the news. I heard about it through that. At the time, I was working on a project which was the Transgender Community Forum, which was way back on America Online. During that time, I would keep up on trans news stories so that we could post them and share them. And so I'd seen that story come through. I think it was a Boston Herald piece on the murder, and that was my initial information about it.
What year did that community start, the trans community start online?
The TCF started in 1994, although we'd been meeting informally for about a year before that on the service. Back then, they didn't allow trans discussions at all in America Online. That was kind of the first barrier we had to overcome, is unmuzzling and telling them, no, we do need to talk, we do need to use these words, we have to be able to say transgender, or at the time transsexual, and so forth.
We needed a space.
Yeah, and so we pushed hard on that. We managed to get their terms of service changed, and eventually got a space, which was the TCF and its chat room, the gazebo.
Are a lot of the girls from back then, are they still with us today, or what's going on with?
Still a lot of folks. I still keep in touch with a lot of people from that time, because we've remained, friends, or at least acquaintances for a very long time. Some of the people that were around at that time were even people like Kate Bornstein, who became a fairly well-known writer, Les Feinberg, who's also a writer who's unfortunately passed away. Folks like this that were just the regular people hanging out back then.
I was a late girl, but I didn't get on there until about 2003 or 2004, and you couldn't pay me to leave those chat rooms, honey.
Oh yeah.
It was just,
they were big.
I just loved how they would just pop in and you just start this. It was just like it was just unreal, and it was so much fun. And I didn't have problems or whatever. And it was nice because we had an online community and not just within, Southern California, but was it just in the no AOL was
No,
what?
it was international at that point
I thought
because
so.
it started in the U.S. They originally were in Virginia, but they were United States based, and they started to open up in other countries like the UK and Japan and Germany and so forth. And eventually, it was international.
Okay. And regarding Rita's death, the individual who was responsible for it, his name was William Palmer. Back then, he had claimed the gay panic defense, correct?
Oh, let me correct on that. Chanel Pickett's murderer was William Palmer, not Rita Hester. Rita's remains unsolved.
The gay panic. He initiated the trans panic defense.
Yeah, he used a trans panic defense in that case, saying that they started to be intimate, and he found out that she was trans, and he flipped out and killed her. And none of it makes sense because he was at a fairly well-known trans bar, and that's where he met Chanel. And he had apparently made comments about how she was the cutest T-slur that he'd ever seen. So he knew. There were plenty of eyewitnesses that said that he knew. Unfortunately, one who did speak out in the courtroom, his defense called her an unreliable witness because she had done sex work. So her testimony was largely lost,
as a lot of us have for survival and to have the funds to transition.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the reality of it is that a lot of these men and a lot of these married men fund our private lives.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just a matter of fact. Tell us about what the first TDoR was like in the Castro district. Do you remember what that was?
I do. There was an event that came a few months before it. I was part of a group at the time called TG Rage. We were doing we wanted to draw attention to the issue. So we started an event. The Castro Theater was going to be showing the Brandon Tina story, which was a documentary that led into the Boys Don't Cry film. So we decided, let's do an event there. Let's hold up placards that have the names of all these people, that lets them know that this is still an ongoing problem and it's bigger than just one case. So we got together, this would have been in March of 99, to hold this little event at the Castro Theater. About 100 people showed up. We held up placards. We spoke out. After that, we kind of said, this worked really well. We got a lot of visibility. We got a lot of people to pay attention to this issue. We should really look on doing like some bigger event. I started to talk with some of the activists I knew in Boston, Nancy Nangeroni, Penny Ash-Matz, and several others, and they agreed. It sounded like this was something that we should pursue. We decided at that point that November 28th, at that point, we've since changed the date, would have been a good time. It was at that time, the first anniversary of Rita Hester's murder, and that we should do an event. So the first TDoR was November 28th of 1999. We had a small crowd of people in Harvey Milk Plaza in San Francisco, about 75 people. They had a pretty good sized crowd also in Boston for their event. And that was how it started. It was still fairly small, but we really felt that it was something that drew attention. It made people know that this was an issue. It was a time when those of us in the community could find solidarity and find a comforting shoulder if we were hurting because we've lost people. It gave us a moment to kind of take back that power and say, this is an issue we want to fight.
It was impactful, to say the least. It was impactful, very impactful. Yeah. You mentioned Brandon Tina, and Boys Don't Cry is one of my favorite films. I've watched it a dozen times. Obviously, the violence is extremely disturbing. The whole storyline, but Kimberlypierce, what she did, so beautiful. It's just so beautiful, and I'm so excited because she's agreed to be interviewed for
excellent
Transbrations, and we're just trying to get the date down right now. So
excellent.
Yeah.
I actually have one of the original movie posters on one of my walls.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
And I have
So
to
I see it
say,
every time I hit the stairs.
and I have to say, Hilary Swank, portraying Brandon, it was just like, damn, he's cute,
Hmm. I hear
like
you.
it was perfect. It was perfect casting. TDoR now happens. It happens every year on November the 20th, and it's observed all over the United States in over 200 cities, and that's including different countries. The week leading up to Transgender Day of Remembrance is Transgender Awareness Week. When did Transgender Awareness Week? When did the two events start to? Is it enter? When were they? When were they kind of combined together?
I really am not sure about when that happened. It seemed to be much more of a, we had the day and it started to expand out from there. People wanted to do more and add to what was going on, discuss other issues that were important to trans people. A lot of people in community might say, people are plenty of aware of us, but it's not about being aware of us. It's about being aware of our needs and our issues and what we're facing. With TDoR being the big obvious, before everything else, we need to be allowed to live.
To breathe, yeah. And to make some money to work.
Yeah. It kind of just grew out, I'd say about 10 years into the project, people started to do Trans Awareness Week. And we've even started to see a lot of people even expand it further than that and start talking about like a trans month, this kind of thing.
Well, there's trans Day of Visibility. There's so many things that have grown out of it.
Exactly. And hey, if they want to keep oppressing us, we're just going to have to take more days from them.
You said take more days from them.
We'll just take more days.
I was like, I know she's not saying take more dates.
No.
The girls were always talking about dates. So I have to ask this. Right. Today, anti-trans violence on record is even more widespread than it was when Rita Hester was killed. And though Smith helped establish the solemn tradition of reading the names of our dead near the end of each year, it's not clear whether that's helped the broader trans community truly remember our dead. Though Rita Hester's murder is still unsolved, her name has never come up at a TDoR event I've attended. Even the date of official TDoR observances was later changed to November 20th so as not to interfere with Thanksgiving. What do you take of Rita Hester's name not being?
That's a damn shame because it was Rita Hester that started this. We did change the date. We moved it to the date that Chanel Pickett was murdered because her story is as much a part of this. And I'd like to think, I read a piece today, in fact, in LGBTQ Nation about Rita Hester and making that point that Rita Hester's death is a key part of this. The investigation into her death was reopened about 3 years ago, I want to say at this point, in part because of TDoR. It bothers me when I hear that, not because I'm upset that it's being pointed out, but that no, it's right. We need to pay more attention to Rita Hester's death and other deaths that have happened. One of my concerns for a long time has been people putting too much focus on how many have died and reducing us to a number, rather than thinking about the fact that every name that is read at a TDoR was a person who was loved, who had a life, who had things they were planning to do with that life, and that life was cut short. Same is true with Rita Hester.
Rita Hester, does she still, that you know of, does she still have family that are living?
She does.
How do they feel about TDoR and her name coming up every year when it does come up? And just do you know?
At the last time that I had contact with anyone close to the family was a couple of years ago when the investigation was reopened, and they were appreciative. I'm not going to speak on their behalf directly, but I know that was the feeling at the time.
Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that it was reopened. So I'm sure that gives her family and the community some bit of a sense of, it's nice to know that justice is being pursued.
Now, to get it, that's going to be the thing.
Right.
That's what we want.
And that's if the person is still living.
Right. Yeah, we don't know. We don't know if they're still around. And after this much time, what are the police going to be going on? And even if a DA has decided to open it, how much are the police going to actively pursue it? Are they going to say, yeah, that's great, it's reopened, and stick it in the file? It's always a case with every murder where you have to keep pushing and pushing. As another example would be the Nisa Morris killing in Philadelphia, where she was a trans woman who had been found dead.
Is that the one who got out of
turned,
is she the
out
one
of
who
a
got
police car?
Oh, that was the police car, not a taxi.
No, as a police car. They gave the police gave her a courtesy ride, what they were calling it. So maybe that's where that comes. But they were giving her a courtesy ride because they thought that she was drunk. And maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. That doesn't matter. What does matter is if she was found shortly after and she'd been bludgeoned. And the thing that's concerning about it, beyond the murder itself, is the fact that the police have spent the last couple dozen years hiding or not sharing their information on it, deliberately obfuscating the materials that they have to say what may have happened that night, what happened during that courtesy ride. They're not saying.
And I just want to say this while it's on my mind, and it wasn't in my notes. You know, a lot of the girls in our community, some are, you know, some just enjoy being feminine. Some have sexual reassignment surgery. Some kind of, you know, they have periods where they're more feminine, and then periods where they're more androgynous, and it's different for everyone. Everyone's situation is different, and how we all feel is not the same. But some girls do strive for being stealth and being passable. Even for some of the girls, some of our trans sisters who are stealth, passable, have husbands, or, you know, they've assimilated into the heterosexual world as biological females. They live their life as and they're accepted in those communities because that's what they're presenting, and that's right. They're accepted. But there are stories where it doesn't matter how passable you are, some of them have still been killed when it's been when people have found out or whatever. It doesn't matter how passable you are. You're not immune to the violence.
Right. I mean, and in fact, there's even cases where it's someone who, that's one of the reasons I say anti-transgender violence versus saying, you know, trans murder or whatnot, is there's people who end up being not so much the murders, but certainly violent acts against people because they're perceived as transgender, you know, even if they aren't. I mean, we're seeing a lot of cases right now with all these arguments about trans people using public restrooms, where you're seeing people who aren't trans who are being attacked in restrooms because, you know, and called out because they don't somehow look feminine enough to be using a women's room, you know. So it's a problem that is affecting a broad, you know, not just us, but everyone seems to be dealing with this, but it hurts us more. And, you know, we're seeing so much more cases where it is hurting African-American trans women under 30.
In Latin, yeah. The bathroom debate, do you get involved in that?
Unfortunately, I have had to, I mean, certainly in my column, I've had to write about it. And it's just, it's such a frustrating thing because it keeps coming up over and over. And it's like, you know what, folks, we've already got laws about like sexual assaults at restrooms. So if you're talking about trans people specifically wearing a dress or whatever in a bathroom, doesn't invalidate any of those laws. They would still exist. And frankly, if someone's going to be sneaking in and perving in a restroom, they don't need to go through all this. They just need to put on a janitor's jumper. You know what I mean? You know, so why, this is all just so ridiculous.
So I'm going to say that, I mean, you know, I remember when I was starting taking hormones in 2007, 2008, and running down to Tijuana for silicone shots from Dr. Molina, and just all the stuff that I've did, the laser hair removal. Yeah, it is. It's very easy. There's much more social support for individuals to transition. You know, you still have to have your finances in order, and, you know, some psychological, what is it called? The emotional support or whatever. Some people think it's for them. It's not. To see the conversation every day, and for news columns to have their own columns regarding, you know, trans issues. I never thought our society would get to this point where there was this amount of discussion and understanding and inclusion to a degree. But I will say, with that inclusion, to me, some of it doesn't come across as genuine. It comes across as very commercialized and very exploitative. You know, what's your opinion on that?
No, I agree with you on that. I mean, it's always one of those sort of challenges because you'll see people who are being allies, who are being supportive, and then you'll see that extra level of, targets selling trans flags, and you kind of go, well, that's great, but how does that actually help trans people if you're doing that kind of thing? I actually have very complex feelings on that, because on the other hand, I go, if Target or whoever wants to sell trans stuff, there's going to be a young trans person out there. That's the first thing they see, and they see that acceptance, and that's good. But at some level, it's like, really, this isn't helping a trans person in need. This isn't, directly aiding us.
The 15th anniversary of TDoR, you had wrote this, and you kind of were mentioning it earlier. Anyone can potentially fall victim to anti-transgender violence. Transgender identified people and others whose gender identity or expression does not fit the typical binary are who you may think of first. But anyone who is perceived as not being masculine or feminine enough for their attackers is at risk. Cases of anti-transgender violence have affected people of all ages, from newborn to elderly, and go across all sexual identities, races, and socioeconomic backgrounds. There's no magical way to be protected from anti-transgender violence. I've been in situations where people have asked me if I am a boy or a girl, what do I have between my legs? And I had to learn as I got older to not only ignore it, I wouldn't say it doesn't frighten me per se, but the way some of these people have acted and how excited they got, I knew it was first of all, this is not your business. One time I was walking down the street in Brooklyn, minding my business. A young Black guy had said something. And there's been occasions where I've had to tell people, to mind your business. Like, seriously, I'm not your fucking kid. I'm not your relative. I'm someone just passing by, and I'm not your fucking business. And so I told him, I said, mind your fucking business. And I don't usually cuss at people and stuff, but I felt like it that day. And he started looking around on the ground, and I just started walking off. And I was walking into a Subway, downstairs. He picked up a bottle or he picked up something and he threw it. It didn't hit me, but but the look on his face that I had even told him to mind his business. And I don't know if I had made my voice deeper or whatever. He got so pissed, and I guess he wasn't expecting that, for someone to tell him to mind your business. But and I remember one time I was in Baltimore walking down the street, and this guy, he was like, you just, nowadays, you just can't tell. And instead of me cussing that one out, I cussed out the one who he was talking to, who was actually minding his business. I was so mad, but that one had went around the corner real quick. But I had to learn to not engage them, because, those are situations that could turn into physical assaults and violence. If they're already focused on me or paying me attention, now that I'm actually talking and addressing them and paying them attention, I hate to say this too, it becomes a form of entertainment for them. And so I'm very aware of that. This said, I want you to understand that after 15 years, and with cases dating back 30 years before that, one can start to see that some groups are at higher risk than others. In the United States of America, for example, most cases of anti-transgender violence leading to murder are perpetrated against young transgender women of color, like Rita Hester, who was African-American, correct? Sadly, okay, so I'm gonna leave it at that. I was looking at a website, a website with a lot of the girls' names from around the world. I think half of them are in Latin America. We're talking about some who've been, stoned to death, set on fire, decapitated. Some have been killed by their relatives, in-laws, family members, people in the community, their boyfriends. It's not just always cases of, oh, she didn't tell me, or she tucked and I didn't know, or, da-da-da. Oftentimes the individuals have intimate relations. It's domestic violence. It's not just this, how people tend to think in the media that we're tricking these men.
Right.
What do you say?
I mean, it's true. And certainly, you mentioned South America, South and Central. They have just an amazingly large number of cases that have come out of over the last few decades. And they're like you said, setting people on fire, stoning them, beating them in the middle of the city. In many cases, it's police or military that are actually doing this. Where this is a condoned activity. This is something that is being promoted within that city or that state. And it's, I'm just living my life, and to have to deal with even the hate that we get in this country, the catcalls or the violence that we face, let alone individuals who have been murdered. And then you look at a case like that where it's people being stoned, and it's frightening, it's astonishing, it's deeply moving.
I was just looking at a video in Morocco. I believe it was Morocco, and it was a cross-dresser, and he was actually a big guy, and he was being attacked by some young people, and then they all like ganged up on him real, badly, and I was just like,
Fuck you! Fuck you! That's it! Fuck you, Zwabel! Fuck you!
And I just know from my own life's experiences and being a victim of violence, had nothing to do with being trans or whatever. It was when I was 19. I have very situational awareness, and I just know to avoid groups of men and boys. And it's interesting because now that I'm older, I don't have problems that I used to. I became more feminine and everything, and I also mind my business more. So, I'm not looking for their attention or whatever. But it's interesting because I just know my instincts are to. And just because I really just I don't want to be bothered. I don't, and I don't look like this during the daytime and stuff, and that's intentional. For me, I guess the reason why I dress down, and I avoid them. I do cross streets, and they really are just really. And now, I guess now that I'm older, I'm like, God, they are a pain in the ass. It's just this but that comes with age and stuff. You just get real moody and bitchy, and you just want to go into the store and just do stuff. And it's weird because sometimes they'll do stuff. They'll get in your face. Or I remember one time I was taking a picture of my dog at the beach. This guy jumped in the picture. I was at a rally in Washington D.C. for reparations, and there was this guy. I won't say his name because he's an asshole. He's a transphobe. And a friend of mine was like, "Oh, why'd you go?" And I said, "I went for the message about reparations. Like something positive will still come out of it." But there was so much, talk about, LGBT people in the program to a degree, but afterwards they really, got excited and started saying stuff. But I kind of lost my thought. I just know better, when I'm around guys, how they get excited in groups and stuff. If they do see a trans and it's obviously a trans person or whatever, it's more easier when you are passable, but when you're obviously trans or they're not sure, it can be problematic. James Byrd Hate Crime Prevention Act. Since 2009, we've seen an increase in legislation that helps prosecute those who participate in anti-transgender violence, including the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. We've seen much greater awareness of the issues of anti-transgender violence. We've seen successes in other battles for transgender rights, yet we still see anti-transgender violence every year. We still find ourselves with a list of people who've been violently murdered for simply being themselves. Are you surprised to see the continued increase in numbers? I think last year was like 50.
Yeah, it's disheartening. It's not really a lack of surprise, but it's just, I would like to see a year where the number goes down. And instead it's been going up fairly steadily, especially in the last 5 years for some strange reason. We've seen the numbers just skyrocket over the time of the Trump administration. We've seen hand in hand with that a lot more demonization of trans people.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot more laws being pushed against trans people, whether it's bathroom bills or it's sports or it's all the horrible, horrible stuff out of Florida and Texas this year. And that goes hand in hand. you have these people who are telling us we're the devil, and it's giving them a target,
Mhm.
and you're having people that are being told that we want to assault people or whatever. And again, it's giving people a target, it's giving them a reason. So I don't want to say it doesn't surprise me to see so many cases and see these cases increase, but it's disheartening to see this level of hatred being lobbed against trans people, and to see that hatred play out, to continue to play out, to continue to see trans people murdered at this level.
What do you think about the obsession with trans bodies and with the bodies being the ultimate target of the violence, the destruction, the what do you?
Wow, that's a good question. There's a whole lot to that. A large portion of what we face, in my opinion, ties into, particularly with trans women, is just general violence against women, and
Yeah.
guys thinking that we're their property, and that they can do with us what they will. There's lots of people who have said things along the lines of, what you see a man do to a trans woman in public is what they'll do to a cis woman in private, and it really comes down to that possession of women, viewing women and trans women as prey to their predator, this kind of thing, where it really ends up being, we're seen as a possession to be had, or if we don't meet their standards, to be destroyed. That our bodies are forfeit in their hands.
Yeah, it's a lot. You just want to, be feminine or be a girl or, whatever.
Yeah.
Just don't expect to have to deal. You really don't. You don't. Like, it's the furthest thing from your mind that you end up having to realize that you're gonna have to navigate through all of this new terrain that you only learn to move through it as you go through it. You can hear stories from other girls, some have transitioned back into male or whatever. You can hear the stories and stuff, but until you experience it and stuff, it is extremely emotionally draining. It's very draining. And I don't engage people that much. I don't make conversation, not because I'm insecure or anything. I just really don't want to be bothered. I know when I talk sometimes, people will look, they'll do a double look or just a lot of things. And I'm, not insecure and could care less about being clocked or, them catching my tea or whatever. I could care less. That's not my concern or whatever, but it's draining. It's, and I just find myself having to rest a lot and be alone a lot. And I think it probably comes with the territory when you're trans that, you have to take a lot of time for yourself to nurture yourself and to rest and to go back out into this world that is still, even though there's discussion and somewhat understanding, it's still very much males behave and present this way, females present and behave this way, but you have us, you have people who are transgender, you have people who are non-binary, and we've been around since,
since people.
Yeah, and they act like it's brand new. It is like, just like some people act like Black people are brand new. And I'm just like, y'all still stuck on that? Like y'all still stuck on that shit? Like, seriously, I'm like, just how they're stuck on it, and I don't bring attention to, oh, hi, I'm trans. Oh, I'm like, okay, if I don't know. It's just interesting. In hindsight, did you think that TDoR, Transgender Day of Remembrance, did you think that it would evolve into what it is today and how it's honored all around the world and throughout different, countries in America?
When I first started, even going back to remembering our dad, my initial feeling was that I was shouting out into a void. nobody wanted to hear this. I really, over time, obviously my feelings have changed because it's happening. But in those early days, no, I figured it was, nobody's going to pay attention to this. Nobody wants to hear this. Not only outside of the community, even within the community. We don't want to look at kind of the negative stuff that can happen. Because, and I get that. Nobody wants to talk about the dark side. But this is part of what we face. And we need to at least have an awareness of it, if only to protect ourselves, but yeah, at first, no, I really didn't think it was, I thought that nobody wants to hear about this, but I couldn't not say anything, it felt so important to me that I just had to do something, even if it was not going to do anything.
And thank you. Have you lost anyone personally to violence? Any trans people in your community?
There have been people that I've known who have ended up on the list. There was actually a case a few years ago with a trans woman who I knew a bit, not well, in Florida, who was murdered going home from a TDoR. And there's been cases where, like the Gwen Araujo case, which was very key to myself, where I never got a chance to meet Gwen, but I became very, very close with her family and friends after the murder, and having to hear their stories and be with them and go to her funeral and then be in the courtroom and see her murderers smiling back at me. It's stuff I'll never forget. It's stuff you can't forget.
I remember her story, and I've heard a lot of, I've seen a lot of violence and heard a lot about a lot of violence. And I remember her story, and she was beautiful. She was beautiful. She was beautiful.
Yeah.
And the manner in which it happened and how they carried it out was just so,
chilling.
That was a lot. And I think it took her mother a while for them to change her some documents from male to female.
Yeah.
It took a while.
Yeah, they ended up going to court and getting like a name change and all that through the courts. That was during the murder trial. They ended up doing that.
I don't think and it's interesting that you had said her name, because I was gonna bring it up. I guess I've read some about you, and I've known about you for some time. I've known about you for at least over a decade. I would say a good decade. And I think I've emailed you before some years ago or whatever, or was following you on, it was on Instagram some years ago. I guess I didn't read anywhere that you had that you were a part of the trial.
Please.
All of those guys are out now, right?
All but one. One still remains behind bars.
And it's my understanding that the ones that have been released, that they're were apologetic.
Yeah. The ones that have been released have been. The one who's still in jail is not. The most recent that's released, I believe it's Jose Morel, actually did reach out to Gwen's mom. Even one of them even has reached out to Gwen's mom to apologize or make some amends. Yet still to this day, I met with Sylvia Guerrero, Gwen's mom, about 2 months ago now, a month or two ago. And this is still hard on her to this day. This is still affecting her every day.
It doesn't go away. No. She still lives up there in that area?
Yeah, she does. She's had a lot of difficulty with work.
I know.
Keeping
I saw the
job,
GoFundMe.
this kind of thing. Yeah.
I saw her GoFundMe.
Because this, like you said, it doesn't go away. This is something she faces every day. Even myself, who was not part of the family, just being in that courtroom every day and looking at the forensic photos and looking at the murder weapons.
You said looking at the forensic photo, the pictures of her body.
Right.
You were okay.
Yeah, pictures of the injuries.
You were okay.
Was I okay with it? Not so much, but I still was there.
To support her mother.
You know, yeah. You know, but seeing like the long rope that they tied her up with, and at the same time, you know, again, seeing these murderers standing in there, you know, sitting in that courtroom.
And I know they had, you know, used a pan and a can and just,
yeah,
you know, and one of them said that, you know, I think this is a man. When they had initially met her, or I guess after one of them had some kind of intimate encounter with her, one of them said that.
Yeah, even before that, there was testimony that the very first night that they ever met her, she was over at a house party with them, before anything had ever happened. There was discussion on that night as to whether she might be trans before anything else transpired. You know, and the whole reason for that night at the house party where she was murdered was for them to determine if she was trans. You know, so this was obviously something that they had thought about for some time and thought about what they were going to do. You know, so this wasn't an immediate freak out. Oh my God, I had no idea, because they'd obviously been already thinking about that.
And that girl who played a role in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In 2012, you wrote an article for the Huffington Post titled Transgender Day of Remembrance, Why We Remember. Could you tell us about that article, like for briefly?
Gosh, that was a long time ago for me. You know, I really would have to pull back and look at it, because it has been a while.
I'm going to read a quote from it. It initially started off with, why do we remember? And it was, we remember for Rita Hester and Chanel Pickett. We remember for Brandon Tina, for Gwen Araujo, for Marsha P. Johnson. We remember for Deone Jones of Baltimore. And then there were several other names. So I that went into 2012. But it ended with, we remember for hundreds of others killed around the world in anti-transgender murders. This day we mourn our losses and we honor our precious dead. Tomorrow and every other day, we shall continue to fight for the living.
You know, it's funny, you reread those to me and it's like, I probably could have like sat here and said the exact same words today. That's still, you know, it's something that I always go back to, is especially the end of that, where, yeah, this is our day to mourn. This is our day to commune. And tomorrow we get back out there, you know, but that day, it is our day to remember those individuals. It's our days to remember Marsha, Rita, Chanel, and Gwen, and so many others every year.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
The first one that I went to was around 2006 or 2007 when I was living in West Hollywood. And then in 2010, I became aware that a friend of mine, an associate named Victoria Carmen White, that she was murdered in New Jersey at her female cousin's home. And it was my understanding that her two female cousins, oftentimes they'd be out in Carmen, she had, you know, SRS, but her two female, they'd be at clubs or whatever, and they would be telling people that, you know, she's a man or she's trans or whatever, like, you know, and I guess not really realizing that they're putting her in danger, or even if they did,
and a target on her back.
They didn't care, you know. Yeah. And she was beautiful. Of course, she was beautiful. Tell us, what is a TDoR, typical TDoR memorial? It's the reading of the names, October 1st from the former year to September the 30th. What is the memorial like every year?
I mean, it varies a bit location to location, but that's pretty much the main part, is reading the names, honoring those we've lost. You know, people will speak, things like that. The names are the key thing, is actually paying attention to those we've lost every year. Some places it's a march. Some places it's, you know, a closed door memorial with candles. It varies. You know, there's some cases where, in some countries, where they oftentimes end up in riots. There's a few years ago, there was one in Hungary that ended with a rather large police riot, where the police came out to attack the individuals who were at the memorial. There's also been cases, there was one about 5 years ago in Moscow that was like almost a clandestine event where individuals came to a park but didn't really associate much with each other so that they wouldn't draw attention from the authorities. It really does vary from location to location. And certainly and it's certainly changed a lot over the course of time, where initially it was oftentimes like a small support group would have a reading of names kind of in their private meeting, to being, an outdoor event, a visible event, a march, or, something at a city hall or this kind of thing. To even, cases where, during the Obama White House, where they had an event at the White House, and actually spoke at in the West Wing one of those years.
Okay.
We haven't seen that come back. I'd love to see that happen again. For some reason, it stopped under the previous president. Can't figure out why. But we just it varies. There's any number of ways that people. I've never told people this is what you must do during an event.
Right.
I have tried to say, it's not the time that you hire a DJ and let Absolute Vodka advertise and flow or this kind of thing, because it is a fairly solemn event.
Yeah.
But I'm not here to tell people how to honor their dead. I'm here to draw attention to the issue.
And
so I'm not going to subject you to my own words tonight. This morning I had a ring on my doorbell, and this arrived, and that's what I'm going to read to you tonight. This is from President Barack Obama, and I'll read his words. I send solemn greetings to all those observing Transgender Day of Remembrance on November 20th. At our nation's core is the belief that all people deserve to share in America's promise, no matter who they are, who they love, or what gender they identify as. We owe it to one another to ensure the ideals enshrined in our founding documents of equality, justice, and possibility are made real in the lives of all our people. Many transgender and gender non-conforming Americans have braved tragedy, discrimination, and violence simply for being who they are. And we know that individuals of color, those of lower socioeconomic statuses, those living with disabilities, those living with HIV and AIDS, and the undocumented face higher and compounded risks. These experiences, felt across our country, should move each of us to take part in the work of ensuring ours is a society where every person has the chance to add their unique voice to the great American story and express their identity securely and free from harm. This is why I, and again, not me, but the president, this is why I signed the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act into law 6 years ago, and why I will continue doing everything I can to ensure our future is one where the forces of bigotry and hatred have no place. As we honor those who lost their lives or experienced violence because of their gender, identity, or expression, let us come together as a nation to rededicate ourselves to securing the full measure of possibility and acceptance in our time and for generations to come. Signed, President Barack Obama.
You've been honoring our community for over 2 decades. Do you get overwhelmed?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there have been times over the years where I've had to step away, let other people handle a lot of the day-to-day work on it, where I've had to kind of sit back just because, it becomes a fairly regular, when you're working at this level, and it becomes a fairly regular part of your life. There's a story I've told a few times, again, going back to the Gwen Araujo case, where I had been talking to another trans activist friend of mine out of Texas earlier in the day, and I was saying, you know what, it's been too long, because it had been about 2 weeks at that point, and I hadn't heard about a case. I'm like, it's been too long. There's going to be one coming.
Oh no, don't
And
say
it wasn't
that.
like being a psychic or anything like that. It was just like, you get to a point where you begin to expect it.
And that's the
And I
worst.
don't wish that feeling on anyone.
Yeah, that's horrible. Yeah. How do you deal with the dehumanizing stories? How do you say you take a step back? How do you are there any other ways that you deal with it? I couldn't do it.
For every horrible story, there is a trans person living in their joy. There is a person who has just come out and has had that one first moment of being themselves. You've had people who've been in the community forever who are reaching points in their lives where they are beings of beauty and light and joy. And that's what I have to take a step back and focus on sometimes and go, look, here we are. Here's what we're doing in this world.
Yeah.
Just to pay attention and remember that. Remember our beacons.
There's so many that are thriving. There's so many that are in spaces and places that, when I turn on the TV or look at the news or whatever, I'm just like, okay. Okay. I mean, they're doing it, and
I never expected to see it. And I'm so
Mhm.
just blown away when I see that. When I see that just incredible heights that some we've reached.
What do you think that trans community needs to be safer and to feel safer?
Politicians to shut the
Shut their pie hole.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. We need our allies to listen to us for once and to learn to advocate for our needs rather than what they think we need. We need those who stand against us to get out of the way. We need protections. We need equity. We need to be accepted just for who we are, just for those days when we just want to go to the market and be left alone, and for those days when we want to be the most incredible thing on this planet.
Flawless. Fabulous.
Exactly.
Why do you think so many remain silent regarding the mistreatment and violence towards our community?
Because they're waiting for a crumb. Because
Crumb snatchers. They're crumb snatchers.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you said it, girl.
They think that if they throw us under the bus, they won't come for them. And they'll come for everybody. So
and they do.
So I think that, I mean, straight up, that's what I think it is.
Straight up from the home girl. What advice do you have for young trans people to live their best lives? Or just trans people, period. Not young ones, but period. What advice did you have? And for them to not make it onto this list.
Yeah. I mean, first off, be safe. Don't do stupid. But be out there, find others in the community, be with them, learn, grow, find your place.
I'm not going to go into it, but it's just so interesting to hear the stories about the detransitioners and some who are trying to sue medical providers who perform surgeries and other things. And I'm just like, it's just a whole nother, and I'm not laughing at it, but it's just like, how can you agree to a procedure, surgery, and then you're unhappy with the results, and then you want to, I don't believe the medical providers shouldn't be held legally responsible for that. That's not fair.
Yeah. I mean, the regret level is so low on trans cases, and it's not a thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You were published in Kate Bornstein's book, Gender Outlaws, The Next Generation. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the new generation of trans folks, the younger ones? What do you think about them?
I think they're amazing. I think that they're so, I came out, it seems like in dinosaur days, and seeing people like go in so many different directions that were unfathomable at the time, that we never thought was possible. Mm-hmm. And opening up ground that we never thought was ever going to be touched by a trans foot. Mm-hmm. It's just really, I'm so jazzed, so energetic, based on their energy. It's really just amazing to see. There's a lot of people, especially a lot of older trans folks, who might kind of go, well, back in my day, we did things this way, and get off the lawn. And it's like, no. That's not the way. These folks are incredible, and we need to be there for them, because they're going to show us stuff that we never dreamed of.
I want to say this real quick. So my grandfather, my father's father, he was a transvestite, and he was bisexual. And I learned, he was already passed when I was, born or whatever. I didn't know him, but I was told that when I was 19. And then I have a brother. My brother died in 2020, but when I was like 18 or 19, I remember my brother having a trans girlfriend or whatever. And I guess he was under, he believed it was a biological female, I assume, but she called my grandma and said some things and everything. So and then here I am. So my family, they like to act like it's brand new, but it's actually not.
So, nothing new.
Like nothing. Even the mummies that they keep finding in Egypt, that's not new. So since 2000, you've been a columnist for the Bay Area Reporter. Tell us about Transmissions real quick. What do you focus on?
Issues and ideas of value to transgender people and those who are curious about trans issues.
After an assault in 1997, in 2001, I had went on state disability. I was a victim of gun violence in 1997. I went on state disability in 2002 for a year, and I got like $2,000 a month for a year, and I had moved to New York for just 6 months or whatever. But then I was still having some emotional issues and from the trauma of the situation that had occurred, that still affects me day to day. And in 2004, the federal government had granted me guaranteed income, and I've been receiving that since 2004, and it increases yearly. The only way that I've been able to live this long and to sustain my life and have a decent quality of life is because of those benefits, including health insurance and other things that are for me specific to my case. My life and my story is a positive example of how guaranteed income can affect a person's life for the positive, especially a trans person. It gave me hope. It improved my quality of life. I was able to become an artist and a writer, and to so many degrees to live in peace, and to transition, to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have been able to do the way I was able to do it without that support. But that's not what that support was for. It was just, I was able to things were able to move easier for me. And I'm thankful for that. So yesterday, when I was reading that Mayor Londonbreed announced the launch of the new guaranteed income program for San Francisco's trans community, I was just like, right, the girls getting some coins, some of those tax-paying dollars, and those are the best. Those are the best.
That's huge. We killed it, guys. That's a massive. That's a freaking jackpot hunt. Like 20,000. That's a huge, guys. That's a huge. 19,000. Hell yeah, guys.
What do you think? What do you think about? What do you think of that?
I think it's great. I think that For a lot of our community, we oftentimes aren't able to find work. We're working hand to mouth. We're having to do what we can to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's part of creating a more just world, where, yeah, people can spend some time finding themselves and get out there and do things and not have to worry to that level, that basic level of, am I going to eat today? Am I going to have a roof over my head? All these sorts of things. Is it anything I'm going to be able to benefit from? No, I'll gladly put in coin for that. So I want to see our community do what it can and, survive beyond sustenance.
It's
I think it's great.
It's for low-income trans people in San Francisco. It's for $1,200 each month for up to 18 months. It's going to help with financial insecurity. And she had revealed this yesterday. It's just a pilot program. People can apply from November the 15th through December the 15th. And it's called the GIFT program. And it's temporary, but it's also going to have a range of wraparound direct services, gender affirming medical and mental health care, which is very needed, as well as financial coaching. She said that our guaranteed income program allows us to help our residents when they need it most as part of our city's economic recovery and our commitment to creating a more just city for all. We know that our trans communities experience much higher rates of poverty and discrimination, so this program will target support to lift individuals in this community up. Really
great. And anytime that a city has done a pilot universal basic income plan, whether for a specific group or an overall group, it's been a net positive for that city. So this just feels like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. And in 2015, when the U.S. Trans Survey was last conducted, 33% of trans Californians were living in poverty compared to 12% of people in the general population. Trans San Francisco's experienced poverty at exponentially higher rates compared to the general population. Real quick. Trans Active, a biography of Gwendolyn Ann Smith, is published July 2017. For those who have not read your book, what's the best chapter for them to read?
The last one, the list of names. It's one of the things with the creation of the book is that it also includes a list of every trans murder up to that point. Every name is in that book. That way you don't have to hear about my story. You can hear about them.
I wasn't expecting to hear that, Gwen. Okay.
I know. It's really, I often feel very odd about having a biography out there because I'm still doing work. I'm still out here doing things.
Yeah. And we are happy that you are. And I never thought I would be sitting up here virtually or period in interviewing you about, this, but, every year I keep hearing monthly, I hear the stories, the numbers. I think a few months ago, there was one in Chicago, they found her in a trash can. The majority of them are young. And when I think about them, of course I think about myself, and I know how carefree they may be and, fun, and they want some attention, they want some affection. And I don't think they realize the danger. I was in a situation when I was 19 where I almost lost my life, and it had nothing to do with trans. I hadn't transitioned. And someone thought, they were going to take advantage of me. So I already faced the situation and, was able to walk away, although I was, injured and, suffered psychologically. So when I think about a lot of them, sometimes I'm just like, and when I actually hear the stories, I said, they have no idea, they have no idea. And so, I've already dealt with the brutality from a man, and, was aware that my two great grandfathers killed my great grandmothers in the 1920s. Sister went through, domestic violence and lost her life in a fire. And, I know how fucked up men are, and I know how much they want to dominate and control and destroy, and love and protect and hold and take care and, all of that. But it's too much, honey. It's just like, I like to go to bed by myself, and because I know I'm going to wake up in the morning, it's just like,
I heard that.
It's just a lot. It's just a lot with them. And but again, it seems like there's so many young ones. And I wonder sometimes, do they hear the stories about the other trans girls, or do they have any kind of awareness, that there is a risk? But it
And
doesn't
that's
mean that you should stop.
why the day's there.
But it doesn't mean that you should stop being yourself and living your life authentically in the way you want to live it, because you have that right. It's your life.
Mhm.
It's your life. Just be safe.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Be aware.
This is from HRC. Sadly, 2022 has already seen at least 32 transgender people fatally shot or killed by other violent means. We say at least because too often these stories go unreported or misreported. In previous years, most of these people were Black and Latinx transgender women. And oftentimes we know that they're often dead named too. And that's a major issue when they're reporting on the names of the trans who are deceased. And that
Absolutely.
doesn't seem to be like changing anytime soon.
Not quick enough. I mean, it's a case also where you have who's providing the information. Is it being provided by the law enforcement that found the body? What name are they going to use? What ID are they going to use?
Or is it or is it more so the family?
In many cases, it's a family that doesn't accept this person. They're going to use a different name.
So now what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and we're going to read the 32 names.
Sure.
And I got my candle. I'm going to light my candle. This will be the third time that I've done this. Oh, wow, I didn't realize it was going to be all be some kind of Elvira. But so my candle's disappearing. Is it disappearing? I have my candle, but now I'm going to move it to the side. And it's going to be off camera, but I do have a candle lit for the girls. So this is, I did an event in 2019 in the Bronx, and it was a performance and we read their names. It was at the Bronx Academy of the Arts and Dance had put it on, but it was at a venue.
This one is Dana Martin, Jaslyn Ware, Ashanti Carmen, Claire Legato, Malaysia Booker, Michelle Tamika Washington, Paris Cameron, and Chanel Lindsay.
Chanel Skurlock, Zoe Spears, Brooklyn Lindsay, Denali Berry Stuffy, Tracy Single, Bubba Walker, Kiki Fantroy, Jordan Coffer, Pebbles Ladime, Dime Doe, Bailey Reeves, D. Love Slater, Jamaggio Jamar Berryman,
Natalie Marlowe, Brianna Hill, Joanna Medina, Laylene Polanco, and that's it again. Those are the 22 individuals just this year alone that are trans identified and that we publicly know of.
And again, a lot of these probably could have been avoided. The problem with a lot of people, and I'm saying us, some of us are, some of us not. The same thing they say on the subway. What is the subway line? If you see something, say something. It's the same thing. If you see a trans man or woman or anyone in the LGBT community and you see them going through something, don't just stand and say, oh, poor thing. Say something. There are too many organizations in New York City, and especially in the Bronx, that can help.
So this will be the second time where I've actually read the names.
We remember Tiffany Banks, killed in Miami on October 1st, 2022.
We remember Samaj Valencia, killed in Jacksonville, Florida on September 21st, 2022.
We remember A.C. Morrison, killed in Rapid City, South Dakota on August 21st, 2022.
We remember Maya Allen, killed in Milwaukee on August 29th, 2022.
We remember Dade Ricks, killed in Detroit on August 27th, 2022.
We remember Maddie Hoffman, killed by police in Malvern, Pennsylvania on May 19th, 2022.
We remember Aaron Lynch, killed by police in McLean, Virginia on July 7th, 2022.
We remember Candy Reed, killed in Kansas City on July 24th, 2022.
We remember Hayden Davis, killed in Detroit on July 25th, 2022.
We remember Maricela Castro, killed in Houston, Texas on July 29th, 2022.
We remember Cherry Bush, killed in Los Angeles on July 5th, 2022.
We remember Keisha Chanel Jeter, killed in Augusta, Georgia on July 2022.
We remember Markezia Richmond, killed in Chicago on July 11th, 2022.
We remember Kitty Monroe, killed in Memphis and Cordova, Tennessee on June 29th, 2022.
We remember Charmaine Giselle Marie, killed in Gulfport, Mississippi on June 21st, 2022.
We remember Brazil Johnson, killed in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on May 13th, 2022.
We remember Sasha Mason, killed in Zebulon, North Carolina on May 13th, 2022. We remember Shanalika Yella Dior Hemingway, killed in Albany, New York on May 31st, 2022.
We remember Nidra Sequence Morris, killed in Opelika, Florida on May 14th, 2022.
We remember Ray Muscat, killed in Independence Township, Michigan on May 8th, 2022.
We remember Fern Feather, killed in Morristown, Vermont on April 12th, 2022.
We remember Ariana Mitchell, killed in Hampton, Virginia on April 2nd, 2022.
We remember Mia Love Parker, killed in Chester, Pennsylvania on April 1st, 2022.
We remember Kenyatta Keisha Webster, found dead in Jackson, Mississippi on Saturday, March 26, 2022.
We remember Catherine Katie Newhouse, killed by her father in Georgia on March 19th, 2022.
We remember Tatiana LaBelle, found dead in Chicago on March 18th, 2022.
We remember Vasquez. She was killed in Houston, Texas on February 22nd, 2022.
We remember Matthew Angelo Spaminato, killed in Newcastle, Delaware on February 9th, 2022.
We remember Naomi Skinner, killed on February 12th, 2022, near Detroit and Highland Park, Michigan.
We remember Cypress Ramos. She was found dead in Lubbock, Texas on February 13th, 2022.
We remember Deval Princess, killed in Jacksonville, Florida on January 3rd, 2022.
And we remember Amarli Lej, killed in Wilkinsburg, a borough bordering Pittsburgh on January 1st, 2022.
And that concludes the names of the transgender individuals who were killed in the United States. Obviously, that is only a very small percentage of the trans that have been killed throughout the world in the past year. And we know that those numbers go into the hundreds, and with a lot of people who have not been added to the list, and probably some of them never will be. Yeah. As an African American, as a gay male, and as a transgender, though no fault of my own, I've dealt with and faced a lot of violence in my community and throughout my life. I have to edit this.
Sorry.
It's been plagued with lethal, almost lethal violence. And since I was a teenager, I want to thank you for joining me in honoring our transgender siblings. It is unfortunate that we're born into certain situations that affect us, that are out of our control. Despite the violence, despite the opposition, despite the exclusion, despite the cruelty, you know, I still have a lot of moments of joy, and it is worth every minute. And I would tell any person out there, you know, you have to find some shoes to walk in that you're comfortable walking in. I'm not comfortable walking in heels, so you won't catch me in heels. You'll catch me in some shoes because I like my shoes in case I gotta run. I always say that. I always say that. No, live your life, and you know, have fun and enjoy yourself, and you know, you have to make the best of it. You do. I want to thank you for joining us, for giving us your time, for starting the first event in 1999, for honoring Rita Hester and Chanel Pickett. Want to thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely welcome. It's an honor to have been here.
Thank you. Thank you
Cool.
so much. This was
Absolutely. You're welcome.
I enjoyed I learned so much more even about our community, which you know, it's conversations like this that we still need to have amongst each other, because we are still living and
I agree.
You think about the other ones who are out there who are just, living their lives and want to be left alone, but it's like, you can still use the support, especially within this climate that we are in. And it's nice to go back down memory lane. It's nice to go down memory lane. So yes.
Heard that.
Thank you.
You have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you. I also want to give a huge, huge, huge shout out from the music producers of HBO's legendary 9 Lives. The Banshee Ball is taking place this Saturday, and it's honoring Mother Ebony Lane, the fiercest trans lady in Southern California in LA County, honey. Saturday, November the 19th. Ebony, congratulations. We love you and have a ball. And thank you for all that you do for our community.